Hello and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm Vladimir Solohub. During March 21st, 23rd, a number of security experts gathered in Kyiv for a seminar for the representatives of the government of Ukraine on defense and security reforms. To discuss the seminar outcome and the initial feedback, joining me now is Deputy Dean at George C. Marshall European Center for Security Studies, Professor Sven Bernhard Gareis. Professor Gareis, welcome to Viewpoint.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Professor Gareis, you participated in the session on parliamentary oversight over security institutions, providing the German experience. So, based on the German experience, what can Ukraine take out of it?
Well, actually, this was a very interesting panel, and I had the honor to chair it. We brought in two parliamentarians, active parliamentarians, one from Estonia, the other one from Germany. Actually, the German parliamentarian, Dr. Lindner, from the Green Party, an opposition party, he actually mentioned three major areas of his work at the parliament. The first thing, what does a parliament do in the oversight of security institutions? And then he specifically elaborated on the Budget and Allocation Committee, where he's a member and he's a spokesperson of his party there, the Defense Committee, and the Subcommittee for Auditing. And I think that he gave a huge number of huge experience from his work in this parliament with regard to who is asking which questions. And he gave that information that in the German Bundestag, for example, the General Inspector of the Bundeswehr, of our armed forces, he has to appear in parliament upon the request of the parliamentarians. And this was a kind of new information. Actually, this was my impression, and I think this was of particular interest for the Ukrainian parliamentarians. In the discussion, they talked about that there's still very unregular meetings with high-ranking officials from the general staff.
What about the Ukrainian military officials? What about the officials of the Ministry of Defense? How do they feel about the possible civilian oversight over their activity?
Well, actually, we didn't hear from them during this seminar, but during the discussion, I think it became clear to the entire audience that there is no threat coming from the parliament to the executive branch, but that there is a need actually for shared responsibility for the security of a country and for the close cooperation actually between the parliament when it comes to the money, when it comes to the resources, and the leadership of the military, both the political and the military leadership. The interesting thing was that right after this panel, we witnessed a spontaneous, I don't know how spontaneous it was, but a meeting between representatives, high-ranking lieutenant general and major general from general staff, and the parliamentarians in our conference room. And I think that this was, to witness this, that was a great experience for me.
So, Professor Gareis, if you look at Ukraine's security and defense program, specifically in the past 2 years, do you see any changes, any progress towards reforming it? Obviously, there is a war due to Ukraine, and it has brought a lot of challenges to Ukraine's government and to its Ministry of Defense. So, do you see that the Ministry of Defense is changing something to address these issues?
Well, actually, I'm not an expert on Ukrainian security reform, but what I learned during the many seminars that we are running together with our Ukrainian colleagues in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, I'm the Deputy Dean for resident programs there. What I've carefully listened to what your parliamentarians told us when they were when they came to Garmisch for the previous 2 seminars that we held in Garmisch, and what I learned here about this reform process, I think there's a huge progress being made. And the priorities have changed, and the increase of numbers of your soldiers, and of course the training and the equipment and training and doctrine. Those are the fields. But I heard that significant progress has been made, and we also discussed. I'm just coming from another panel that I chaired on civil-military relations, especially in the field, and the cooperation between the military and other state and non-state agencies in the framework of the comprehensive approach. And interagency cooperation. I think that we are witnessing a continuous progress in this regard, yes.
Professor Gareis, one of your areas of interest is international security policy with a focus on UN peacekeeping operations. Last year, a lot has been discussed whether UN should send peacekeeping troops to eastern Ukraine. In your opinion, without going into details whether it is feasible or not feasible because of Russia's veto right in the Security Council, do you think that this is a wise scenario?
Well, actually, the United Nations would be, without any doubt, appropriate organization. They have a lot of experience, especially in that regard, in post-conflict peacekeeping and post-conflict peace building, peace consolidation. But well, you anticipated my reservation with that regard. It's always very, very difficult to get a substantial and to get an effective mandate by the Security Council, and they have to issue the mandate when a permanent member has vital national interests at stake. So, in principle, I would say it's a good idea, but as a political realist, I would say that it's not very likely that this will happen.
Professor Gareis, between 1994 and 2000, you were a senior research fellow and lecturer at the Academy of Information and Communications. So from your perspective as communications expert, what do you think about this, what some experts call hybrid information war, which Russia is now staging? How dangerous it is?
Well, first of all, I was at this academy as the head of the International Security Policy Department. I'm not a real communication specialist. But, of course, communication is a major weapon, is a major instrument in, as you said, hybrid warfare. And we have to admit that Russia is very proficient and very savvy in this regard to find out where are the weak points in Western countries, where are the weak points in Ukraine, but also in my country, in Western countries, and then try to exploit those weaknesses. And in 2014, for weeks and months, we actually had a dominance, kind of dominance with regard to the narratives that were around of what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on the Crimea. And this was, to a large extent, actually dominated by Russia. The turning point was the downing of MH17. And I think that the Western governments, Western societies, even Western media, they caught up with that challenge. And the way we are treating this kind of propaganda, actually, and disinformation, we have become much more successful in that regard. You know, we have to answer not by mere counter or by sheer counter propaganda, but by patiently telling the truth and making this transparent and telling how we approach certain aspects. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, we had a we had a kind of a scandal in Berlin. Lisa, a Russian, a German girl with Russian roots. This young lady, it was told in our media that she had been raped by Germans because she was Russian. And what did the Berlin police do? They very transparently, very seriously laid out the facts, so it became very, very plausible. And actually, at the end of this story, after many manifestations by Russian Germans, well, it came out there was no rape and there was no attack on this young lady. She had visited a friend. And so that's the way.
It looks like a lot of propaganda, a lot of work to tackle this propaganda. Professor Gareis, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but thank you very much for finding the time to come and talk to us and share your views on this important subject. We were discussing the German experience in parliamentary oversight of security institutions with Deputy Dean at the George Marshall European Center for Security Studies, Professor Sven Bernhard Gareis. I'm Vladimir Solohup. Thank you for watching Viewpoint.